Hello, everybody. I'm Gary, and this is Physical Format Rock and Roll. Thank you for tuning in. This will be another episode of Album Fight, and this is where I like to pick two albums that are similar in some sort of nature, a lot of times by the same artist, but not necessarily. So this time I decided to go with former Led Zeppelin frontman Robert Plant. And the albums that I picked first would be from 1983, The Principle of the Moments. This, of course, this was his second solo outing after Led Zeppelin had disbanded. Pictures at 11 was his first one, and this one got him even further away from the Led Zeppelin sound and had a different style of production that would normally be done. It sounds quite a bit different than Pictures at 11. So he's got Phil Collins playing drums on 6 of the tracks, I believe, and Barrymore Barlow from Jethro Tull plays on 2 of the tracks as far as drums go. Now, the person that he writes a lot of the songs with on here is guitar player Robbie Blunt. Robbie Blunt, or as he is called by some Led Zeppelin fans, Mr. Plinky. That being because of the incredibly plinky sound on his guitar throughout most of this. I will say there are times on this album where it almost becomes distracting, the sound of his guitar, because you want there sometimes to be a little more distortion or something to go along with it. But obviously, Robert Plant wanted this sound. He wanted to get away from maybe the Jimmy Page style of guitar. He had a lot of different people he was listening to in the 80s. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. There are certain times on this album where it really works. And there's a few times where it doesn't. So let me jump over to the next album. And I have it going up against Now and Zen. This is from 1988. Now and Zen was a success. And this was after 1985's Shaken and Stirred, which was quite jarring to a lot of fans of Robert Plant as far as how far he goes in trying to get a modern 80s sound and maybe trying to be a little too cutesy and avant-garde. This was a welcome return to some people with his sound there. It had a few hits on it. So let's go ahead and discuss this album a little bit, then we'll come back, jump to Principle of Moments. This was a change of writers. So now he had Doug Boyle on guitar and Phil Johnstone on keyboards. And they co-wrote a lot of the songs on here. This has a little more fully realized as far as sound. It's a little more fuller. Once again, though, not too many heavy guitars on here at all. And actually, this is pretty well known for being the time when Robert Plant actually finally kind of acknowledged that he was in Led Zeppelin, because his first 3 albums, he pretty much denied almost being in Led Zeppelin, or not denied it, but he tried to shy away from it. And when he did tour, he refused to play any Led Zeppelin songs. Now this one comes along, and on the opening track, Heaven Knows, which is a great song, the guitar solo, well, that sounds kind of familiar. Well, that's because it's Jimmy Page playing the guitar solo. He also plays a little bit on Tall Cool One, which was a pretty big hit off of this album. So now we've got Page here on a couple songs. This album is also very well known because on the song Tall Cool One, it has Led Zeppelin songs sampled on it. Let's see, you've got Custard Pie, The Ocean, Black Dog, and Whole Lot of Love. They take little pieces of that, throw it in there, and it's a very up-tempo song. It's funny though, because going back and listening to it again, you realize at the time thinking, oh yeah, this is such a rocking song and everything, and it's really still not that rocking. The guitars are still not very heavy on here, and this album, I think now suffers a bit from sounding dated because of Robert Plant trying to, and the producer and all that stuff, trying to mix in a more modern sound. There's a lot of embarrassing 80 cliche noises in here going on. Some of the drums and the programming that gets put in here isn't the more natural sound that you appreciate from Robert Plant. Now, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This has some very good songs on here. Right here, on all three of these that are on the hype sticker are probably three of the best songs on there. But then it also has songs like Helen of Troy and Billy's Revenge and Why. Those are all three throwaway songs in my mind. They don't do anything for me. White, Clean, and Neat. Another song that is really not that worthwhile. But Walking Towards Paradise, which was actually a bonus track that is, I don't believe it was on the album, but it was on the CD. That's a very good song. It starts out, and you think it's going to be another one of these rinky-dink songs because it starts out with all these electronic drums going off. But it turns into a very strong song. The vocals are good. The lyrics are good. Some of the lyrics on here are very good. Like Ship of Fools. Ship of Fools is a great song. Lyrically, it's great. Robert Plant sings it wonderfully. The guitar accompaniment to it goes along very nicely. The only bad aspect of that song would be that wood block that they keep hitting throughout the song. That gets a little annoying. You kind of have to block that out. But the rest of it, that song is great. So it does have some really strong songs on here, but it's also got some weak songs. It suffers a little bit from 80 cliches. Now going back to another 80s, but an earlier one. So let's talk a little more about the Principle of the Moments. Like I said, he was trying to get further away from the Led Zeppelin sound. Definitely does that on the guitar. It starts out with a good song, Other Arms. That's a pretty strong song. In the Mood, totally different for Robert Plant. Almost like a doo-woppy kind of song or something, but it still works. It's a good song. Reckless Love is really good. Messing with the Mekon, that's okay. Through with a Two-Step. I love that song. That is a great song on here. Horizontal Departure. Stranger Here Than Over There. Those are both okay. Not amazing or anything. But it ends really strong with Big Log. And Big Log is another song, lyrically done very well. Robert Plant sings it very well. He sounds good on this album. His voice, he is still using the recording style on his voice. I don't know, the microphone setup or however they recorded his voice that he kind of started on In Through the Outdoor with Led Zeppelin. That like a little bit of delay that he puts on his voice, a little bit of reverb type thing to give it that particular sound. That's on here. Not so much on this one. He was starting to get away from that type of sound. His voice sounded just a little bit different in the way they were recording it. Still sings fairly in a higher octave, higher range, on this one than maybe he does on the other one. Both pretty good albums. I was very surprised, though. I hadn't listened to them for a while, and I was kind of surprised that they do sound a bit dated at times. You know, some of that 80s stuff and the type of recording and the, you know, the little gimmicky things that they use doesn't necessarily hold up now. Especially for, you know, somebody like Robert Plant. You know, it's one thing if it's a band that was, you know, just from the 80s and you might expect it, but when it's a rock and roll legend like Robert Plant, it gives it a little bit of a dated sound. Still very enjoyable albums, though. But I have to give the pick to this one. And honestly, when I went in to listen to these again, I thought I was going to pick this album. But I did not. I was surprised that it was this one. And it wasn't really that hard of a choice for me to pick this album. This one is different. There are a few times where I feel like it's forced. He's forcing it just to be different, but for the most part, it works. Even though, like I say, the guitar is too damn plinky sounding, but for the most part, it works. Robert Plant is in fine voice on here. He's experimenting, and for the most part, it works. So I definitely give The Principle of the Moments from 1983 the nod over 1988's Now and Zen. Curious what you guys think about it. What's your favorite out of the two? I might pick a couple other Robert Plant albums here in the future. And I'm not saying that either one of these is necessarily my favorite Robert Plant solo album. I might save that. But for now, I'm picking The Principle of the Moments. I'm Gary. This is Physical Format Rock and Roll. Thank you so much for watching. You can always catch me on Twitter and Facebook. Until the next time, my friends, I will see you down the road.